So of the 25 plus years I've been in the video business, 16 of those were spent with a company called Rhino Records. I ran their home video division, and we really developed it as a pop culture company. We're doing a lot of classic television shows before anybody bothered with television, a lot of classic long-form music, cult classic films, Mystery Science Theater 3000, things like that. I left them at the end of 2002 and started a company called Self Entertainment. We owned the Ed Sullivan Show, so I was involved with putting out the 4 episodes that the Beatles appeared on, which was a rather amazing experience because I grew up watching that. I got tired of working for other companies and making money for them, which is why I started some more. And the premise here is dealing with pop culture, old television shows, programming that most major studios wouldn't bother with because it deals with the collectors, it's not well known enough. Music, groups like B.B. King, Black Oak, Arkansas, Nazareth, a lot of old country artists. Again, looking back, dealing with a certain segment of the market that's not broad and mainstream, but there was a lot of people who have an interest in the product. I was working for my father doing architectural drafting. And I loved working with my father. And the only problem was I hated my father's partner. And the only person I hated more was my father's partner's son. And my best friend, who I'm still friends with, his uncle owned a record store. And I had the opportunity to go in and manage a new store he was opening. And I was in retail for about 2.5 years. And I always set a goal to work for a major record label. And I interviewed with Warner Brothers for a sales position, and they interviewed a lot of people. It came down to 2 people. He got the job because he had an internship previously at Warner. I eventually got a job at ABC Records, and sort of an interesting sidebar because the person who replaced me at the last retail store I worked at was a guy named Jack Sani. And the record store sold records, but they also sold guitars, amplifiers, things like that. And Jack always said he wanted to eventually get out of the record business and become a studio musician. So after working for ABC for a few years, I went back to the store and I asked the owners, where's Jack? Jack's working in New York, he's doing studio work. I figured that's great, he fulfilled his dream. Fast forward many years, I moved to LA, and this is probably 18 years ago, and I'm reading a review on Dire Straits performing in LA. And they're saying Mark Knopfler was his usual amazing self, but spectacular in his performance was guitarist Jack Sani. And I go back and I look at the video, and sure enough, there's Jack Sani. So he really pursued a dream, and he started at the bottom, and he found ways to work himself up. If somebody had told me when I graduated high school what I would be doing at this point in my life, who I'd be interacting with, all the things that I'm now doing, I would have said it's impossible, it'll never happen, and it can. I had a guidance counselor in high school who told me you'll never amount to anything, you'll never be accepted at a college. And I guess success is the best revenge. And despite what people told me, I knew that there was an opportunity, and you really have to pursue the dream. Don't be afraid to get your hands dirty if you're going to get into this business. Everybody has to start somewhere. When I first got into the record business, I was, running a really small store that didn't do much business. But I listened to music. I tried to pick up as much information as I could on the industry so I understood how it worked. I interacted with people, I spoke to people, I listened. Humility is really important. Don't be afraid to be turned down, because I got turned down a lot of opportunities. That job with ABC, that I got with ABC, that came after being turned down by Warner Brothers. But the job with ABC was wonderful because it got me into the business. And I started off doing sales, and I was driving all over the Northeast. And I drove in rain, snow, sleet. It was terrible, but I learned the business from the inside out. And I created relationships, and relationships are critical. It's a small industry. And when I say industry, we're talking about entertainment, be it music, video. Everybody talks. It's very incestuous in a lot of ways. I built relationships, and the relationships have helped me as I've moved through the business, as I moved through the record business, and then I moved into the video business. There's still people now, 30 some odd years after I originally got into the business, that I knew and worked with in the record business that I'm still dealing with now in the video business. I think if there's one thing that anybody should learn and understand and do, build relationships. Stick to your word. If you say you're going to do something, do it. It's the little things. Somebody calls you, return the phone call. That's how you build relationships. If you're going to be dealing with somebody on a regular basis, learn about who they are. Build that relationship, not just with them, but with who they are. Because those things will come back and benefit you. A lot of what allowed me to build this company and be successful in the past is because I try to be honorable in my business dealings. If I said I was going to do something, I did it. There was follow through. And there's no sense of complacency. You can't afford complacency. There's always somebody who's going to be chasing you, that if they work a little bit harder, if they're a little bit more creative, they will pass you by. One of the things that I learned really early on when talking about sales, I've always encountered people whose title is, VP of Sales and Marketing. And nobody really understands what sales and what marketing is. And over the years, every time I've interviewed people to work with me, I've asked one question. I've asked a lot of questions, but one in particular. In 20 words or less, define for me the difference between sales and marketing. And nobody's ever nailed it. And it's very, very simple. Sales is getting product to the consumer. Marketing is getting the consumer to the product. It's simple, and it's become a mantra because it's really that simple. And people tend to make it complicated. It isn't complicated. So for me, going out on the road and doing sales for ABC Records, I would go to retail stores, distributors, one-stops, knowing where I was going to be getting marketing support, what was viable in a specific market. I would go out and I would try and sell the product commensurate with what the market needs were. A great example is because I was in the Northeast, we were breaking a group back then called Orleans. And they had a big hit, You're the One. I knew that nationally it wasn't going to do an enormous amount of money unless we were able to break it out of their home market. So I made sure that in the Northeast there was a broad spread of product on the group and worked with the promotion people to make sure there was airplay to support the product that was being laid out. And again, airplay, radio promotion, that's marketing. That's bringing people to the product. So I needed to make sure that when I was getting support from marketing, that I was supporting them with sales. When I interview people for a position, there's a few things I look for. One is enthusiasm. Another is enthusiasm to the next level, which is passion for what we're doing, an understanding for what we're doing. I was never interested in somebody who wanted to work with me or with the company because of who the company was or because they thought being in the entertainment business was fun. Somebody who wasn't afraid to get their hands dirty. Somebody who would listen and learn. One of the things I've learned as I've gotten older is how much I don't know. And I think when you're young, you still have a sense of immortality and that you know everything. And as you get older, you realize how much you don't know and how much there is still left to learn, and you start taking enjoyment from that process of learning. And I think it's really important that when you're young, you enjoy the process of learning, because when you get into the real world, it's a different sort of learning than in school. It's the real world. And it's a different perspective. And there needs to be enthusiasm and passion for what you're doing. In marketing product, there's two ways to look at it. There is a structured, orderly marketing plan, and there's some stuff that happens organically. In a marketing plan, you have to understand who your market is, who you want to reach, what it takes to motivate them to come looking for the product. So you need to look at, if you're dealing with records or CDs, you need to think about, where do they have a following? Is there going to be, a single? What sort of airplay? Are they touring? There's lots of things like that. You want to do promotions. You want to do promotions with radio stations. Do you want to do it with, the morning drive? Are there specific, celebrities that will talk about it, i.e., a Howard Stern? I'm going to be putting out a Sam Kinison film. I know when I send it to Howard Stern, Howard's going to talk about it a lot. That's really simple marketing. Do you want to do advertising? Do you do trade advertising? Do you do consumer advertising? And it's very, very easy to overspend on marketing beyond what's really needed, which takes you to the organic approach, where when we did the marketing for Transformers and G.I. Joe, or what I'm doing now with the Mr. Peepers or Good Morning World, it happens organically. You go out, you see the internet, you find the core fans, and you go to them directly. You don't have to advertise on radio stations, in print. You just go directly to the consumer, directly to the fan, because it's easy to target them. So marketing, you have to really look at what you're selling to determine how you're going to market it. When you're talking about the life of marketing of a project, it varies according to what you're marketing. If you're marketing a new CD and you've got a single, cut that's getting a lot of, AOR play, or it's, breaking as a single, you know that your marketing is going to start well in advance to get people aware of who the group is, what they're doing, where they're touring, etc. And then your marketing plan has to extend out through follow-up singles. And you also need to keep in mind that if you're trying to break an act, then you're going to be looking at the future. How do you want to position this group? And the positioning of the group is really important. When you're dealing with a feature film or you're marketing a television series, you have to look at, you basically have one shot, because in the video business, DVD business, you have one shot and you have to go for it. If you put out an ongoing series, there's a peak. Your first couple of releases do really well, and then it tails off very, very quickly. So it's a shorter window for the marketing. You don't need to look as far out as you do when you're trying to build an artist. I deal now with product where there's built-in recognition. So the marketing is different than when you're trying to break an artist. If you want to be an artist, you have to learn to deal with rejection. You have to be firm in your beliefs. You have to be willing to work hard, because nothing comes easy. I remember years ago when I was working for ABC Records, the promotion guy came in with a test disc on this group that he had found. And ABC looked at it and said, no, we don't like it. Went to Capitol, went to Columbia, shopped it everywhere. He finally got Epic to take it. And after probably 6 or 7 different labels passed on it, Epic finally put out the Boston record. And it was huge. So again, there was a lot of rejection, and rejection is sometimes based on a lack of knowledge. It's based on personal interests. It's based on relationships. And again, if somebody says no, keep in mind that no is not the end of the discussion. No is the start of the negotiation. The other thing to remember is no is the most important word in the English language, because it gives you all the power. If you say yes, human nature dictates that you can't go back and say, I know I told you I could do this, but I really can't. It goes against human nature. If you say no, I can't do it, it gives you the latitude to come back later and say, I thought about it, and maybe I was a little bit hasty in saying no. Maybe we can do it this way. Now what you can do is come back and negotiate on your terms. So you need to believe in what you're doing. You need to be persistent. You need to be strong. If you believe in what you're doing, then it'll be less likely that people will take advantage of you. Talk to other people. Find out what they're doing. Learn from their experiences. Learn from their mistakes. Learn from their successes. Again, it comes back to relationships. It's speaking to people. It's listening. It's learning. I think somebody who's just getting started as an artist really needs to be passionate about what they're doing. They need to believe in what they're doing. But that passion, if they have talent and they have passion, that gets conveyed to other people. And if you believe in yourself, it's much easier to make other people believe in what you do. If you don't have that passion for the music, if you don't believe in what you're doing, if you're getting into it just because you want the glory and the adulation and the exposure, then you're probably getting into it for the wrong reasons. Be persistent, believe in yourself. If somebody says no, find somebody that says yes. Just keep working, be creative. Find as many different avenues to expose yourself and your music to people as you can. Play clubs, build a following. Get people talking about you. Start a website. People talk on the internet. They share information. Good news and bad news travels really, really fast on the internet. Use it. There's a lot of tools out there to expose yourself. Don't rely on the major record labels or even the smaller record labels to break you. You can have a lot to do in breaking yourself. Put your music in front of people who do television shows. Think about the exposure if a song of yours gets played on the Gilmore Girls. There's ways to do it, but you need to be creative. When I first got into the record business, we were selling Sweet Baby James at $4.98, but if you wanted it in stereo, it was $5.98. At ABC Records, I remember Steely Dan, Asia, came out at $7.98. And we gave everybody a period of time where they could buy it at $7.98 because the price shortly after the release was going to go to $8.98. I remember when cassette was an alien concept and everybody was buying 8 tracks. And this will date me. I can still remember where in Agata Vita in the drum solo, you switched from one track to another on the 8 track. And then all of a sudden, 8 tracks were taken over by cassettes. And it was cassettes and albums. And then CDs came along and, albums started to go away. And then singles went away, which personally I think the death of the single really hurt the record business. You're being asked to pay $18 for an album where you only know one song. It's a leap of faith. You could buy a single and get a song that you knew you liked and another song from that album on the other side, which might lead you to better understand what the group was and where they were musically. And it opened up a lot of doors. There's a man who has a chain of stores. His name is Bob Higgins, who has always maintained that the death of the single was, really hurt the record business. And he was brilliant in that insight because it allowed people to really come to grips with and understand who a group was before they made the commitment. And again, all this downloading, it's because people want to buy what they want to hear. To a great extent, I think one of the things that's really hurt the business is the people who run the companies are passionate about the money. When I got into the business 30 some odd years ago, we were passionate about the music. We loved it. We could pick up an album and you pick up a Buffalo Springfield again and you look at the list of names on the back, you can identify 25 to 50% of the names on the back. There was a passion about where the groups came from and how they evolved. That passion isn't there to the same extent now as it was then. There were personalities in the business who really stood for something. There are still personalities, but they're hit makers. They build groups, and there's not necessarily depth. For better or for worse, think about the stuff that really drives people. Cadillac, there's been a resurgence in the sales of Cadillac to a great extent because they've changed the design, but what music is laid behind the Cadillac ads? It's Zeppelin. Apple used Stones, Start Me Up. That music's compelling, and it's compelling to a certain segment of the market, and it holds up.